That was used for tapering and putting angles on. Every piece has to be hand shaped. And there's a three-step process. The first thing you do is you taper it. You make the top wider than the bottom. And you do that on the joiner plane. And what you do is you take a cut here, half, 3/4, and full. And you do that about 3 times on this side, flip it over, do the same on the other side, until you get about an 1/8 inch difference between the bottom and the top. And then you round the top, and it has to fit into that arc. This is your gauge. Now, this is everything you need to know to make a 9-inch bucket, because every piece has to fit into there. It has to fit into the arc, and it has to fit into the angle on both sides. And so you use the draw horse, and you use a draw knife, which is that big one on top, and it's called that because you draw it towards you and you work the sides until you get it rounded out. And then the third step is to put the angles on, and that's the most crucial, and that's done on the joiner plane by laying it flat, tipping it until it fits, and you constantly check it with this. When you have enough pieces and you put them together, they start to round out. And when you drive the truss hoops, the temporary bands on there, the tighter you drive them, the more it forces those angles together, and that's what makes it watertight. There's no glue, there's no nails. It's the pressure of the bands that holds those together. And that's the very first bucket I ever made, 2008. I have to keep tightening it. My wife uses it as a flower pot, but she puts a plastic tub in there. First year she just put dirt and water in it and about ruined it. So that was 2008. That's made out of pine. Pine was the main thing that they made the buckets out of because, good morning.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. Pine was the dominant species around here. Pine also is very flexible. And so you can work with it, and it's soft, you can work with it. This one's made out of red cedar. And this is one we sometimes use when we have kids doing demonstrations. I take it apart and see if they can put it back together. And they only go back one way. And I get people say, hey, I've got this wooden bucket, it fell apart, can you put it back together? It's like putting a jigsaw puzzle back together wearing boxing gloves. This is one I just got together yesterday. That's the shell, and if you pick it up, you can see that the angles.
Can we pick it up?
Oh yeah, go right ahead. That the seams almost disappear.
Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, seriously, it's like trying to make something square and go round.
Why does it have no bottom?
Well, I haven't gotten to putting the bottom in yet. See, that's once I have it together, then I start doing the other things. The next thing is to get the inside round. The outside's round.
Yeah.
So I have to get the inside round, and for that I use what's called the scorp up there. It's a rounded blade.
What's it called? Oh, the scorp. Yeah.
And you reach in and you pull.
Yeah.
And you draw a circle, you scribe a circle, and you work to that circle until that bottom is perfectly round. And then I'll take a tool called the crows, and that sits on top, and you just run it back and forth, and what it does is it carves a groove in the bottom. And then you take a compass, and you go in that groove, you go around 6 times. And if you come back to your starting point, then you've got the right size. And you cut a circle, and you have to...
Crazy. Like, seriously, for a bucket, it's awesome.
You know, you have to shave it down till the edge is only as thick as that groove.
Yeah.
And then what you would do is you would loosen the bottom. Take that band off. Splay it a little bit. push the bottom up in
Yeah.
until it pops into that groove.
Yeah.
And then you drive that band back on. And that's how the bottom
Yeah.
fits. It
Yeah.
fits into the staves.
Yeah.
And then once you have that, then you make the permanent bands. Those are just temporary.
Yeah.
I use 18 gauge strips of steel.
Yeah.
And I measure, I cut it, I rivet it,
Yeah.
and then drive it on.
Yeah.
But I make the band smaller than where I want it to go. So I have to drive it. And the tighter you drive it, the tighter the bucket gets.
Okay.
And that's what makes it watertight. There's no glue, there's no nail.
Yeah. I was gonna ask you, do you seal anything?
No, it seals itself.
That's amazing. Is that because like the wood will swell? I mean, does the wood swell and seal itself, or?
If it's not already tight, you can put it in the water and it'll swell.
Yeah.
And that's what they used to do. These are what they call keelers that they use
See,
down
buddy?
in Somerset to
Don't drop it.
gather
It's
the
heavy.
sap from the trees. And they were called keelers because there's a big German population down there, and they cooled their milk in buckets.
Yeah.
And the word for cool is keel. So these were coolers or keelers
Yeah.
that they hung on the trees.
That's interesting.
And there would be a crew that went from sugar camp to sugar camp, and they would take the buckets, take them down the creek, wet them, get them to swell,
Yeah.
tighten everything, go to the next camp, so that you had your supply.
And that was to keep the syrup cold, you said?
Well, they used it to keep the milk cold.
Oh, the milk. Yeah.
Okay, and that's why they
okay.
called them keelers.
Yeah.
So
That's crazy. That's awesome.
And
How
there were-
long have you been doing this?
since 2008.
Are you serious?
Yes, you can learn things in your old age.
Yeah.
You really can.
That's awesome. That's super cool. Good for you.
Yeah, there was a fellow. I work at Drake Well during the summer.
Yeah.
I run the steam engine in the replica.
Yeah.
And so this fellow, he was there as a museum educator, and he wanted to make sure someone knew how to do this because of the close connection to coopering and the oil industry.
Yeah.
And so he taught me
You call it coopering?
coopering. Cooper is an old Dutch word that means tub or bucket.
Yeah.
And that's what a cooper does. He
Yeah.
makes wooden containers.
Yeah.
And there were 3 different kinds. There was a wet cooper, a dry cooper, and a white cooper. What's that?